Hello. In this episode, you will learn about exogenous ketones, what they are, how they can help you function better, and the Lyme Ninja Keto Challenge.
I'm so stoked about the Keto Challenge. I really believe a ketogenic diet is one of the keys to healing from Lyme disease. But getting your ketones up to a therapeutic level can be a challenge. And now scientists have figured out a way that we can hack your ketones. So stay tuned and we'll tell you all about it later in the podcast. Okay, Aurora, tell us a little bit more about today's guests.
Dr. Heather Cardin received her Doctorate of Chiropractic from Cleveland Chiropractic College in Kansas City in 1997. She and her husband first opened their first chiropractic office in her hometown of Paola, Kansas, and she's now currently practicing in Overland Park. Her patients benefit from her knowledge and expertise, drawing from her extensive training in diagnostic technology, applied kinesiology, acupuncture, and nutrition. Betsy Walker believes she got sick during a camping trip in 1996. She had typical flu-like symptoms, but these were attributed to her allergies time and time again. It took her 3 years to get properly diagnosed, and by that time Lyme disease had affected her central nervous system as well. She attributes feeling back to normal to a ketogenic diet.
Thank you, Aurora. And here's our interview with Dr. Cardin and Betsy Walker. Hi, Dr. Cardin and Betsy Walker. This is McKay Rippey from Lyme Ninja Radio.
Hello. Thank you for having us on the call today.
You're welcome. It's exciting and fun always to have two guests on. Dr. Cardin, let's back up a little bit. How long have you been practicing medicine? How'd you get into it? Why medicine?
I think even as a little girl, I knew I wanted to help people and I was going to be a doctor. So I was on the track to go to med school. I was also working in a pharmacy and saw people kept getting refills and getting prescriptions, 5 by 5 by 5 and filling another prescription, which kind of led to about my third year in undergrad saying, you know what, I want to look into the avenue of more of what the nervous system does or what the brain and what the tissue does. So it kind of guided me a path from going to the traditional medical school route to going to the school I'm a chiropractor by trade, also certified in acupuncture and applied kinesiology. I really felt that those were the focus that I wanted to focus on, not just giving people prescriptions to help get rid of the symptoms, but actually knew that the body had the innate ability to heal itself, given the right circumstances. So I delved in pretty deep in school into anatomy and physiology and biochemistry and knew what food could do for our body and knew that this was a really an avenue that I felt comfortable with. So I started really early on looking at what food and nutrition did to our bodies, for our bodies, in a positive way and a negative way. So as I got out of school, I was already practicing a low-carb, high-fat diet. I had experience with a couple patients early on with cancer. I looked more into a ketogenic diet. I also had a patient early on with MS and looked really what the ketones can do for our body. So I'll be practicing 19 years in March. So we've always practiced and taught a low-carb, high-fat diet and have used a ketogenic diet as an adjunct of therapy to help our patients further their health status. And it's been for a variety of patients, not always just for fat loss, but for improving immune systems, decrease in inflammation. So fast forwarding a few years here, I had the great opportunity of being introduced to exogenous ketones. But early on, I knew I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to study more about the body and give the body the platform to heal itself.
And you kind of snuck in there. You said we. Now, you practice with your husband, am I right?
I do. I'm sorry. I am a mother of 4, and I do practice with my husband. He focuses a little bit more on the nervous system and maybe a little more functional neurology, a little bit more the brain affecting the autonomic nervous system and how our body responds to different types of stresses. I focus a little bit more on the wellness component being blood analysis, hair analysis, food allergies, those type of things. A little bit more of the biochemistry, and he focuses a little bit more on the neuroscience of it. So together, I think we have an amazing office where we can really help people meet where their physical conditions or health conditions are and then take them to the next step where they want to be.
That's amazing and terrific.
So I will probably always say we. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to sneak in there, get a little plug for your husband, too.
Yeah, and I didn't say we practice in Overland Park, Kansas. I'm a Kansas-raised girl. So our office is called Cardin Center for Wellness. We have a lot of tools to help offer people to get their body to their optimal state of health.
So, Dr. Cardin, thank you. And I'm very excited that you brought along Betsy Walker so she can talk about her experience with Lyme disease and a ketogenic diet and exogenous ketones. So, Betsy, did I call you Betty?
No, you did not. You called me Betsy. You were correct.
Hi, Betsy. So,
Hi.
How long have you had Lyme disease?
Okay, so in the spring of '96, I went on a camping trip, and that's when I believe I contracted Lyme. I was seriously ill when I got home, and I never felt well after that. I had the typical Lyme symptoms of having flu-like feelings all the time, and I just kept hitting, dead ends at different doctors. I was told it was my allergies, and so it took about 3.5 years to get a diagnosis. I was diagnosed in 1999. August of 99. And it was by then late disseminated Lyme disease, central nervous system affected as well. So as having Lyme arthritis and just numerous other issues. So,
yeah, it's really rough, isn't it? Those first few years.
It was extremely rough. Yeah, and actually for years after that, because it took 3 different treatments to get to a place where I felt like I was somewhat normal again, as most normal as I could feel anyway as a Lyme patient with late disseminated disease. So
first of all, I'm always curious, where were you camping? What part of the country?
Huntsville State Park in Texas.
Okay, so it was in Texas itself, yeah. I'm always amazed.
It was, and that was...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, that was a little bit of an issue getting the diagnosis. Even though I had positive Western blot and a lot of clinical data, the infectious disease doctor who saw me had a little bit of an issue treating because I had never left the state of Texas, because some people just don't seem to believe that it's in different areas of the country where it actually is. So
that's mind-blowing. Because here there's a test. I mean, and it's the Western blot. It's the accurate part of the test. It's positive. It's on his desk, and he's still saying, "Nah, it can't be Lyme. It's got to be a false positive because we don't have Lyme in Texas," right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, just mind blowing. You just want to take those people and shake them a little bit. Wake up.
True.
So after you finally got your diagnosis, what treatments did you try?
Well, the first treatment was doxycycline for 6 weeks, and that was actually not good. I felt worse than I did when I started it. It seemed like I was having a severe onslaught of reactions to it, mostly just worsened symptoms, I guess you could say, but it was very miserable. I asked my doctor to send me to the infectious disease doctor, who's the one that didn't want to believe I had it. It took about 2 months to get him convinced to give me IV therapy. And I only found out about the therapy through the Austin, Texas Lyme support group that I went online and kind of joined up with and started trying to find information on my own. And then I thought it was pretty healing, but I was left with a lot of other issues like vertigo. I was falling down a lot. Prior to the IV therapy, I couldn't walk some days. It was pretty difficult, especially since I was teaching aerobics at the time. So I would find myself getting up to go teach a class, and I couldn't get out of bed.
Oh,
so,
my God.
Yeah, it was pretty miserable. I couldn't feel my muscles work. There were a lot of issues, and those kept on even after the IV therapy. Not the walking so much, but I would fall. I couldn't feel my muscles work. I had, like I said, vertigo, just numerous issues. Hearing has actually kind of been something that it kind of stayed with me. Not that I couldn't hear, but the loud noises would bother me and actually pain me in my body. If that makes any sense, it would just send pain through me.
Yeah.
Okay. And memory was a big thing for me. Concentration for a very long time, but memory was really difficult, pulling out things that I knew were there, but I just couldn't access. So that was an issue. My third treatments were, I guess it was part of, 2004 January is when I started with that doctor. I had to wait till he was on the insurance. And I went through those treatments for 15 months, and it consisted of IM injections in my hips for 8 months, and then 7 more months of oral antibiotics, which was basically Zithromax and Flagyl, and I don't know if I can really say that, but that's what it was. And then I had a co-infection diagnosed finally, which helped me get back into the gym, feel my muscles again, and be able to, not be quite so off balance, that kind of thing. So I continued on that treatment, though, like I said, the entire 15 months, so 8 months with the injections and 7 with the additional antibiotics.
And what was the co-infection?
I had babesia, and I actually did not get the test done, but my son, who is 15 now, I was actually pregnant with him between my second and third set of treatments, and he has been tested for Lyme because he has such severe eczema. I was starting to get desperate to figure out what was wrong with him because, there were days he wouldn't come out of his room. Last year in the summer, he spent a whole month in there and lost like 8 pounds. He was constantly scratching and itching, and he got a staph, not infection, but like a colonization. But he was miserable. And anyway, so I was kind of desperate to find out what's going on with him and had a Lyme test done just in case for some reason it might have crossed the placenta to him when I was pregnant, or maybe through breast milk or something like that. I knew that was a possibility. Mm-hmm. And he did not come back with Lyme disease, but he did have antigens to babesia. So I kind of considered that my confirmation that that's exactly what I had as a co-infection, that my doctor was correct. He based it off of symptoms. And the treatment he gave me was Mepron, which worked really, really well for me. So
when you finally got the Mepron, that was kind of one of the last things to bring you not healthy, but
it
closer,
at least got me back. Right. It got me back to where I could feel my muscles work again. The doctor also about that time put me on a ketogenic diet, which helped tremendously. So between the two, I don't know if it was, I think the ketogenic diet was started right before I started the Mepron with the co-infection, because I was still complaining I couldn't go back to the gym. Well, if I did, it would take 5 to 7 days to recover from one workout, which is kind of hard to exercise when you can't go but once a week. Right. So he started the Mepron, and then he put me also on the ketogenic diet because, in his words, Lyme bacteria feeds on sugar. So no grains, no sugars, very tiny amounts of rice potato pasta, and that was it. He basically called it a modified Atkins. But when he told me it was a tablespoon of that, and that was it, about 2 days of that, and I said, that's not even worth my time. So I went strict ketogenic. Yeah, I went strict ketogenic, and it was, to me, it was life-changing. I was back in the gym. I could go 4 or 5 days in a row without feeling exhausted. I had a lot more energy. It just changed a lot for me. I lost like 18 pounds in 3 months. So the weight that I was carrying from not being able to exercise, it just fell off. And it was just that part in itself was life-changing.
And how about brain fog and Lyme brain?
Well, I had a lot of that brain fog got lifted with the first IV therapy, but I never really had the complete clearness that I have now since using exogenous ketones. That has cleared up to the point where I don't wake up some days with a clear brain and some days without. Now it's every day a clear brain. So
let's talk about that real briefly, and then Dr. Cardin, I have some questions for you. So you're cruising along now. Things are pretty good. You're on this ketogenic diet, and your life is back. And why did you try exogenous ketones?
Because I was, I at some point decided to go with a traditional nutritional, therapist, somebody to help me with my diet, thinking that I needed some kind of a change at some point, or that I needed to make sure I was doing things right, because I had a couple things that I had concern with, in like mineral levels, things like that, vitamins in my body. So I started seeing a nutritionist, and she put me on what was basically another standard diet of, the standard American diet. And I was a little concerned with bringing grains back in, and then she added, and at first the grains kind of didn't seem to bother me too much, but I wasn't losing any weight. I actually started kind of gaining weight. And then she added a serving of fruit. Yeah, she added a serving of fruit, and that was 10 pounds in 1 month that I gained.
Wow.
She took the serving of fruit back out, and I lost that 10 pounds in a month. So I was pretty well convinced then that I was doing the wrong thing and started doing some more research on my own and decided I needed to go back to at least what I was doing at the time. I went back to was a ketogenic, cyclic ketogenic diet where I took in some carbs about once a week, sometimes once every 2 weeks instead. But so it was basically ketogenic, but with a little bit of carb cycling. I still wasn't quite achieving some of the results I wanted. I wasn't feeling strong in the gym like I had before. And so about that time it was December last year, I was working with a trainer. I had started working with him late November, I guess, and it was mid-December when I walked in the gym, and he was drinking something. It was white milky looking in a bottle. And I asked him what it was. And he was like, oh, it's just something I'm drinking. I'm experimenting on myself with. And I said, but what is it called? So he said it was exogenous ketones. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, you have exogenous ketones? How come you haven't told me this? Because, I'm on a ketogenic diet basically. And, I would love to try this. So he hooked me up with a friend of his who had a sample. And the very next morning I started that. I did half of a pack. And then that afternoon I felt so good with it. I thought I would just go ahead and do the other half before my workout. And I sailed through my workout. And within, by the end of the workout, actually, I decided I just really wanted this. So I said, can you help me get it? And he said, well, let me figure that out. He said, but I have a tub at home. I'll just bring you that for now. So that's what he did. And I started on it the next day. It didn't take me long, maybe a couple of days before I decided I'm just doing a full scoop morning, full scoop in the afternoon, because that's kind of, where I thought that I needed to be. And it was, maybe a week or two, and my strength was increasing, and then another week or two would go by and my strength would increase even more. And just everything has come back online, and my vision seems clearer. Like I don't have any bad vision days anymore, ever. My brain is completely clear. The noise issue that I was left with, like if somebody even sneezed next to me, it would cause pain in my body. That went away. And it was kind of interesting how I noticed it. I was just listening to the radio in the car on the way to work one day, and I was like, why is my radio so loud? I never listen to it this loud. It always bothers my ears. Well, I started thinking, well, if I can listen to it that loud, maybe I'll try it a little louder. And I did, and it was fine. So each day I would start noticing I would listen to it a little louder. And then I just realized that it just wasn't bothering me like it had before. Since then, I've even been to a concert and was up near the stage, and it didn't bother me in the least. So people sneezing, it doesn't bother me anymore. So it's been just a really nice change to feel more normal, like there was more than what I even thought I could get to before.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, Dr. Cardin, can you explain to us what's going on inside Betsy's body? Like, why is she healing like that? Why is she feeling better? What are ketones and what are they doing for her?
So I love that question. We actually have 3 ketones that our body can use. One's called beta-hydroxybutyrate. The other one's acetoacetate, and the other one's acetone. So on a true ketogenic diet, what she was experiencing is her body was really starving the carbohydrates out of her body, and then she was allowing her body to make endogenous ketones. Ketones are little signalers for our brain. They do a variety of things. The first thing that they do is they actually supply more oxygen to our bodies at a cellular level. We have the powerhouse of the cell called the mitochondria. So it actually gives 38% more oxygen to the cell, increases the ATP, but they also turn on brain neurotransmitters. So at the same time that it's giving more oxygen to the cell, which is a great thing we need when healing's happening, it's also helping balance out the brain neurotransmitters. When we talk about pain or inflammation, we talk about GABA, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all those are brain neurotransmitters. So ketones are known to dampen the excitatory neuron. So her sensitivity to noise and sound decreased. She was able to visualize better. A lot of that's just because ketones are turning on those enzymes inside our brain. I think we forget so many times that our brains are at least 60% fat, and our brains dictate our entire nervous system. So with pain and inflammation, with Lyme's or any type of inflammation, we have to think, where's that signaling coming from? Well, it's actually coming from the brain at a cellular level. So when she was able to use a ketogenic diet and get the carbohydrates out, which were actually increasing inflammation, she had a reduction in inflammation. Ketones are also muscle sparing, so she was having an increase of strength at the gym. Then when she added the exogenous ketones, Her body didn't have to metabolize those. They go straight into her bloodstream, and they do a whole host of little things. Specifically, they stop an inflammation process called NLRP3 inflammasome, but it also increases and signals some protein that we need to help our immune system and also to reduce inflammation. So making it sound a bit more complicated what it is, but if you give your body what it needs, which is ketones, which are simply a byproduct of fat metabolism, they're very essential for our nervous system and at a cellular level. So I think, and Betsy has told me before, the longer she continues to take these exogenous ketones, the better and better everything seems to get. And she also has a great story about her son using the exogenous ketones. But just think what your body needs at a cellular level to help increase. It needs oxygen and it needs energy, and ketones provide both of those.
That should be recorded. Good thing we are. That was an amazing explanation.
Well, I didn't go into reverse oxide. I didn't go into, and I would love to see this because we know what happens with interleukin 6 and 8, and also the tissue TNFR, the tissue necrosis factor. Alpha is actually also turned on. So we see not only do we stop the inflammation process, we actually also help mediate the interleukin hormones, 18, 6, 8, 1 beta, 1 alpha. It's amazing what happens inside the body. And we have those cold research data now that was published actually last year in 2015.
Yeah, one of the nice things about the Lyme community is almost everybody who's had Lyme for a while has their PhD in either medicine or biochemistry. So even though this is a little bit technical, I'm betting most of my audience can hang in there for this, or at least are smart enough to know exactly what to look up and will understand the articles they read about it. So will you talk a little bit more about like what's the difference between being on a ketogenic diet and then adding in exogenous ketones? Because it's kind of a big deal now that you can get exogenous ketones because they were used in some research not too long ago, but they're so expensive that you couldn't get them. You can't go down to GNC and pick yourself up a bag of exogenous ketones. It's a big deal that they're out there at all.
It's a very big deal, and I've done nutraceuticals since I practiced for 20 years, and I just can't believe in my lifetime we actually made a pure therapeutic exogenous ketone that's palatable. The reason we have not been able to have an exogenous ketone, which means in a powder form we can put in our body, is because ketones are very, very acidic, and they're very hard to make them tolerable to our GI system and palatable at the same time. So the exogenous ketones we're talking about are not the ketone ester, but actually the ketone salt. So there's a lot of biochemistry that goes into making it palatable. We have to add a lot of sodium in there to help alkalize the acidity of the ketones. But you're right, we've studied ketones for 100 years. We've studied exogenous ketones for almost 3 decades. Dr. Karen Clark started the movement trying to get them palatable. We've since moved them to the U.S. and worked really with our military defense department and some at the government agency. But now we have one, and it took a lot of money and a lot of backing and a lot of biochemistry to put them into a laboratory to make them palatable and get the right ratio of the salts to put your body into a state of ketosis in less than 59 minutes. So that's amazing in itself. So if we talk about the difference of making endogenous ketones, and that happens on a true ketogenic diet or even on a starvation diet, or an endurance runner can even make endogenous ketones. Our body will take the fats that we eat and actually will turn those into ketones. But that takes sometimes weeks or months to days to get into. And like Betsy said, it can also be isolating when you're trying to have 1 tablespoon of rice, you're trying to count this and count that. And then if you're having a pain syndrome day or your sleep's off or your cortisol level's off, you're back out of ketosis. So exogenous ketones are not a substitute for the ketogenic diet because they're exogenous, but what they can do, and what we've seen time and time again in laboratory, that you can eat a low-carb, high-fat diet or a modest paleo diet or a grain-free diet and put the exogenous ketones in and still get all the benefits of ketones without putting yourself into a ketogenic diet, which is a very low-carb diet, less than 5% carbs. You're feeding your body about 80% fat, anywhere 10 to 15% protein. And it can be very taxing just trying to keep up with your macros. Now we know we can eat a clean diet, a whole food diet, low-carb, high and healthy fats, and drink Keto OS or exogenous ketones and see a rise in level in our ketones at a urine level and at a blood level and the breath level. Again, it used to take days to months to get into ketosis. And once she slipped out, Betsy fell off. She had 2 tablespoons of rice instead of 1. It could take her 3 to 5 to 7 days to get back into ketosis. And now she can do it simply by just drinking a white powder.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know that I started a ketogenic diet this summer, and as silly as this sounds, I accidentally had a beer.
Yeah.
That's a long story, but it truly was an accident. So I drank this beer. I was just not paying attention to anyway. I drank this beer, and it took me 10 days to blow red again in my keto sticks, in the ketonic stick. So it knocked me out. And the other thing I want to bring up here, and then Betsy, I'm going to ask you about your son, is that the palatability is, if that's a word, is a big deal. I test almost everything on myself and my family, my poor family. And my youngest daughter turns her nose up on almost everything. She has very sensitive taste buds. She should have been a chef or something like that. She even has a preference to what type of water she drinks, because she'll drink some bottled waters and just turn them away and say, oh, this tastes terrible. Of course, the bottled water she likes is the expensive stuff. Luckily, she likes our water at home. So when she's home, she'll drink our water. We have really nice well water. Anyway, so the palatability is a big deal. So Betsy, that's why I want to ask you about, with a 15-year-old son and you're trying to get him to do supplements. I know when I try to give people Chinese herbs or my liposomal herbs, they have to kind of clothespin their nose and chug it down. How'd you get your son to drink these, A, and are they really that good, B, and then tell us a story about what happened once you began giving him the ketones.
Okay, well, he has actually become very open to trying things for his eczema because it has been so severe. And, I mean, he seriously didn't even want to take a shower anymore because it would burn his skin. So I basically let him know that I thought it might help his skin and why. We talked about that. I believe he's had some gut issues as well that may contribute to this. And so we talked about that. And then he went ahead and tried them. He was not a fan. He originally tried the orange. And the orange to me tastes fine, but to him it did not. So what I did instead was I added some orange flavoring drops to it. And then I also tried it's not Gatorade, it's Powerade. Powerade Zero. They have a red and a blue. And for some reason he really liked the red in the orange ketones. So he would drink one of those, either the orange or the red in his orange-flavored ketones. I don't know why it changes the taste, but it changes it in some way that he really prefers it. So that's what I let him do because it helps him get the ketones into his body. And now that they've come out with the Maui Punch flavor, that one he really loves. He took a sip of that and turned around and said, "What did you put in this one?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Really?" I said, "Nothing." And he was just really happy with that. So he drinks it. He has no problem with it. He'll make one. He'll take it on the bus with him in the morning to school. It's just really helped him tremendously. His skin is pretty clear. Every now and then if he gets around an allergen, he might get a little scratchy and itchy, but for the most part, it's very clear. His face looks nice and smooth now and not all scratched up, and no dry, patchy areas, and he has no, scratching and bleeding going on. He sleeps through the night, so now he stays awake at school, which is a big help. He's been doing much better this school year. He has actually an auditory processing issue as well, so it kind of limits his abilities in school. So this has been a big thing for him to be able to focus and listen. He doesn't have the background noise issues bothering him so much like he normally does with auditory processing. And he's actually participating in class and getting his work done. So it's just been a total change in him. Even his mood is fantastic. Most teenagers go through those mood swings, and he was going through them, but now his mood is really leveled out, and he's just a fantastic kid to be around. So
that's amazing. That's incredible. I had a bit of psoriasis starting when I was a teenager too, and nothing like your son went through. But it's just miserable. It's absolutely miserable.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the first time that he got help with his eczema, where it cleared up some, he looked at me and said, "Maybe now people won't run from me," and I just wanted to cry. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, as a teenager, imagine still going through that, and people probably think, well, there's something wrong with him. I mean, maybe it's our modern day leprosy for him. I don't know, but it's sad. So.
Yeah. I'm glad you found him some help. And Dr. Cardin, can you talk about ketones and gut health? Because I know the ketones can nourish the gut quite well. The small intestine likes them.
They absolutely do, because what happens is we know that our gut needs to be at a pretty acidic basis anywhere, especially starting with our stomach. But I and also want to talk about the 3.0, which we put some inulin or chicory root in there, which helps those prebiotic turns in. But what we know, if we just look at the two fuel components we have either ketones or we have glucose, which is a byproduct of carbohydrates and fat. Carbohydrates and protein. So if we feed our body with glucose, we know that there's actually an inflammatory process that increases in the gut as it tries to absorb the macronutrients from the carbohydrates or the glucose. But the ketones do absolutely the opposite. They actually help decrease the inflammatory process and turn on the healthy protein synthesis within specifically the small intestine. But we also know the major function of the large intestine is to reabsorb water. So if we're giving our body a fuel source that has a higher oxygen component or capacity to it, that our large intestine is much, much happier as we get ready for absorption and evacuation. So it's not as clear-cut as, well, I guess it is. It's pretty clear-cut for me when we see what sugars feed inflammation, and it just creates havoc on the gut. We know ketones make a happier environment for the good, healthy bacteria to feed on, and we don't let the sugar feed on the other bacteria that can get out of balance, like Betsy kind of talked about before. But we know that the ketones will help reduce that inflammatory mediated response, which enhances our absorption, especially in the small intestine and the large intestine.
Thanks for that explanation. I want to wrap up by first saying thank you to both of you. You've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate your willingness to share your stories and your knowledge about ketones and all the science behind it.